You know, usually when we talk about a religious tradition or like a spiritual practice, there's this underlying expectation of light.
Right, yeah, like an upward focus.
Exactly. Think about the architecture of a cathedral, right? You walk in, and the stained glass deliberately filters the sun to look, heavenly. The choir is physically elevated,
Oh, totally.
and the priest points upward, essentially saying, there is the divine, up there, away from the dirt.
Yeah, it's entirely upward looking. And I mean, that architecture, both physical and theological, it's structured, it's comforting, and fundamentally it's aimed at order and preservation. We construct our spirituality to act as a shield against the dark, basically a way to keep the chaos of mortality at bay.
Right. But then you step into the world of esoteric occultism,
Right.
specifically the folk magic of the underworld.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's a whole different thing.
It really is. Suddenly, that cathedral is completely inverted.
Yeah.
We're looking at a spiritual landscape that is like the absolute definition of muddy waters.
Yeah.
It is a place where the sacred and the profane don't just mix, they completely swap places.
They really do.
And, okay, let's unpack this central paradox we are looking at today, because it is truly mind-bending. How did the bureaucratic expulsion of Catholic Jesuit priests from South America in the 1700s accidentally create a renegade, scythe-wielding skeleton saint who is worshipped by hundreds of thousands of people today?
It's such a wild trajectory, and to understand that paradox, we are examining a highly secretive, deeply esoteric text today.
Right.
The source material is a grimoire titled Liber Falxifer, the Book of the Left-Handed Reaper. And our objective for this deep dive is to objectively examine the history, the anthropology, and the incredibly intense occult theology of the Argentinian cult of Señor la Muerte, or the Lord of Death.
A left-handed reaper.
Exactly. We're tracing how this figure evolved from a regional, jungle-based folk religion into a really complex, dark, Gnostic system.
And before we pull that thread, we need to establish the parameters of this deep dive for you, the listener, because the source material we are unpacking today contains detailed descriptions of acts that are classified as black magic.
Yeah, it's very heavy material.
Very heavy. It outlines animal sacrifice, the harvesting of human bones, ritual curses and practices explicitly aimed at causing harm. So we need to be clear. We are not endorsing, practicing, or validating these acts.
Right, not at all.
We are not taking a moral stance here either. Our goal is strictly educational. We are exploring this text to understand the belief system, the immense psychological weight of these practices, and, the historical context. We are reading the blueprint of a very dark architecture to understand how it was built. We're not moving into the building.
Right, perfectly said. The lens here is history, psychology, and comparative religion. Because to understand the mechanics of this magic, we really have to understand where this figure came from. And it begins with an act of profound rebellion, specifically in the year 1767.
So paint that picture for us. What is actually happening in South America at that exact moment?
Well, we're in the Cuenca del Plata region, which covers parts of modern-day Argentina and Paraguay. And the Jesuit order had been operating there for decades.
Right.
They had established these massive reduction missions. They were essentially attempting to assimilate and convert the local Guaraní Indians. But the thing is, the Jesuits became too successful.
Too successful, like they had too much power.
Exactly. They amassed an incredible amount of wealth, land, and political autonomy. I mean, they were practically operating an independent republic right there within the Spanish Empire.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So King Charles III of Spain viewed this as a direct threat to his sovereignty. So he issued a decree. The Jesuits were to be expelled, their wealth confiscated, and their presence entirely eradicated.
And it wasn't just a polite eviction notice, right? I mean, the Spanish military rolls in. It is essentially a violent seizure.
Highly violent, yeah.
And the Jesuits, along with the Guarani who lived in these missions, they actively resist. So the Spanish forces begin burning down these richly adorned churches just to break the resistance.
Right. And in the midst of this destruction in one of these burning temples, there was a specific life-sized icon.
Okay.
It was carved from the wood of the Palo Santo tree. And this single wooden carving depicted a really strange, heavy trinity. It was Jesus, Satan, and death, represented as a skeletal reaper.
Okay, stop right there, because carving a life-size skeleton And putting it in a church right next to Jesus and the devil is already a massive aesthetic choice.
Oh, absolutely.
In Palo Santo, that translates to holy wood, correct?
Yes, exactly. Palo Santo, or lignum vitae, is this incredibly dense, highly resinous wood. When you burn it, it produces a very distinct, sweet smoke that indigenous cultures have used for centuries in, like, shamanic clearing rituals.
Right, I've seen people use it for smudging and things like that.
Yeah. So the physical material of the statue itself already held deep indigenous magical significance long before the Spanish even arrived. The church likely used it to try and bridge the gap with the locals, to make the Catholicism more familiar.
But the bridge burns down.
Literally.
The temple is in flames. And a group of Guaraní Indians managed to rescue this massive, heavy wooden icon from the fire. They drag it deep into the jungle to hide it from the Spanish military. And before they scatter back to their respective villages, they do something deeply symbolic.
Right.
They physically split the carved image into 3 separate pieces.
Yeah. So one tribe takes the piece depicting Jesus, another tribe takes the horned devil, and the third tribe takes the image of death, the skeleton armed with a scythe.
This feels like a corporate splintering, but with profound theological consequences. It is like a massive conglomerate is being hostily taken over, and in the chaos, the Death Division completely breaks off, goes entirely rogue, and just absorbs all the fierce anti-establishment survivalist energy of the local population.
That's a great way to put it. And what's fascinating here is the sociological mechanism of syncretism, but it's a very specific adversarial kind of syncretism.
How so?
Well, the Guaraní, who took the skeleton, they did not look at it and see the Catholic concept of a punishing afterlife, right? Or like a reminder of original sin. They totally stripped away the Catholic theology and merged the aesthetic of the Grim Reaper with their own ancient shamanic gods of the underworld.
Wow. So they completely paganized the icon.
Exactly. They turned it into a magical fetish, a protector against what they called bad death.
But, why do oppressed groups so often adopt the darkest, most terrifying symbols as their ultimate protectors?
Yeah.
Seems kind of counterintuitive, right? Like, if you were suffering, wouldn't you want a deity of comfort and light?
You'd think so, but when you are entirely powerless against a heavily armed empire or against, rampant disease and crippling poverty, a gentle, passive protector offers zero psychological relief. You want the most fearsome, uncompromising force in the universe standing between you and your enemies.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Death is the ultimate equalizer. It's the one force that conquers kings, generals, inquisitors, everyone. So if you can forge an alliance with death, you suddenly have the ultimate weapon in your corner. We see this exact psychological and spiritual survival tactic elsewhere in South America, too.
Right. The text draws heavy parallels here with Afro-Brazilian traditions, specifically Quimbanda.
It does. If you look at Quimbanda, you have the figure of Exu, particularly the Exus associated with the cemetery and the crossroads. The similarities with Señor la Muerte are striking. Both traditions utilize the colors black and red.
Right.
Both entities demand offerings of hard liquor, tobacco, and sometimes raw meat. And most importantly, both are viewed as path openers.
Let's define that for the listener, because a path opener is a very specific type of magical function.
Sure. A path opener is a spirit that literally removes obstacles from the practitioner's life. Exu uses his trident to clear the way. Señor la Muerte uses his scythe to actually cut down anything or anyone blocking the devotee.
Okay, so it's very pragmatic.
Highly practical, results-driven magic. It is not about attaining spiritual enlightenment. It is about surviving the week.
Right, just getting by. But because this cult was born from rebellion, from literally hiding in the jungle from military forces, it developed a severe dual nature. It is not monolithic.
No, not at all.
It has one face it shows to the public, and one face it hides entirely in the shadows. The text divides the practice into 2 distinct streams, right? The culto abierto, the open cult, and the culto privado, the closed cult.
Yeah, exactly. The open cult is the exoteric side. It focuses on what practitioners label white magic. This involves healing the sick, drawing prosperity, and providing general protection for the family.
Right.
The altars for the open cult are bright and visible. They use white, yellow, or half-white, half-black candles. The central statue of the skeletal saint is usually draped in a white or red cloak, and the altar itself is covered in bright red carnations.
It is highly communal, too. The open cult hosts these massive public feast days. August 15th is a huge one.
Oh, yeah, huge festivals.
Entire neighborhoods gather. Traditional folk music plays continuously until dawn. Devotees carry massive statues of Señor la Muerte through the streets. If you were a tourist walking by, It operates very much like the veneration of any traditional folk saint. It provides social cohesion.
It does. But what happens when the bright lights of the public feast fade and the real desperate work needs to be done?
Right.
That is where you enter the culto privado, the closed cult. And this is where the grimoire, Liber Falxifer, really lives. This esoteric faction focuses heavily on black magic, offensive curses, and absolute uncompromising secrecy.
And the physical architecture of the closed cult altar tells you everything you need to know about the energy they're trying to harness. You cannot elevate the altar like a traditional church shrine. It must be as close to the ground as possible, ideally built directly upon the dirt floor.
Yeah, that's crucial.
So why the floor? Why not just put it on a table?
Because the entity they are connecting with is chthonic. Chthonic refers to deities or spirits of the underworld, the earth, the grave. The energy does not come from the sky, it emanates from the soil, from the decaying matter and the bones beneath our feet.
Ah.
So the statues and fetishes must be physically grounded to act as lightning rods for the currents of the dead. Elevating the altar severs that connection. And this altar is usually covered in a heavy black cloth. The statues wear black cloaks.
And there is a strict exclusionary rule about who can be on that altar. Because in the open cult, you might see Señor la Muerte sitting comfortably next to a crucifix or a statue of San Catalina.
Right, very syncretic.
But in the closed cult, the Lord of Death is a fiercely jealous entity.
Oh, intensely jealous. Absolutely no other saints or spirits are permitted in that space, not even the image of the crucified Jesus. The Lord of Death demands total, undivided sovereignty over the altar. Furthermore, the rule of secrecy is absolute.
Like nobody else can see it.
Nobody. If anyone other than the owner of the altar even glances at or touches the consecrated statue, the tradition dictates that all the accumulated magical power drains from it instantly. The space has been profaned by the gaze of the uninitiated.
Wow.
So it has to be kept hidden, often locked in a wooden coffin or draped under a black silken shroud when not actively in use.
It is intensely intimate.
Yeah.
You are essentially hiding a radioactive spiritual core in your house.
Yeah.
And the relationship is maintained through these highly regimented weekly feedings every single Monday. You don't just recite a prayer to the saint, you literally feed him.
Yeah, the offerings are very methodical. Liquor is poured into a dedicated chalice, often steeped with fresh rue leaves.
Rue, what's the significance of that?
Rue is an herb with a very pungent, bitter scent. Historically, it's associated with powerful cleansing, warding off the evil eye, and setting boundaries. Then there is the tobacco. The practitioner lights a thick cigar, draws the smoke into their mouth, and blows it directly over the statue exactly 13 times to empower it.
13 times.
Exactly 13.
And the food offerings really highlight the stark difference between the open and closed cults. Because if you were operating in the open cult, you were offering things like grilled pork chops, sweet popcorn, round slices of onion, chocolate, and honey.
Yeah, feast food, human food.
Right. But if you were working in the closed cult, the midnight rituals of the black arts, the menu shifts dramatically to satisfy what the text calls a more ferocious appetite.
It gets much darker. The offerings shift to raw, bloody pork chops, raw hearts and livers of pigs or sheep, whole, intensely hot chili peppers, black beans, things viscerally associated with blood, biological heat, and the harsh reality of death.
But there is one massive, unbreakable taboo regarding the food across both cults.
Yes.
No salt. Never any salt.
Never.
So explain the mechanics of that taboo. Why is salt the enemy of this practice?
Think about the function of salt throughout human history. It is a preservative, right? Before refrigeration, salt was how you stopped meat from rotting.
Yeah.
It halts decay. It locks organic matter in a state of stasis.
Yeah.
In many Orthodox religious traditions, salt is used in exorcisms and blessings specifically because it represents purity and the preservation of the soul against corruption.
But the realm of death is the exact opposite of preservation.
Exactly. The Lord of Death governs transformation, decay, and the ending of finite forms. Death is the ultimate engine of change. It breaks down the old so the spirit can be released.
Oh, wow.
So, to offer salt to a death deity is a direct insult. You are offering a substance whose fundamental energetic property is to oppose, halt, and banish the very power the deity represents.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. The psychological conditioning embedded in these rules is fascinating. The text explicitly states that all the plates, chalices, and utensils must be bought exclusively for the saint. You can never, ever use them for your own meals.
Right, they are sacred objects.
And if you were to accidentally eat from the plate of death, Tradition dictates that it is the metaphysical equivalent of ingesting a deadly poison. You will literally wither away.
It establishes massive life-or-death stakes for the practitioner.
Think about the listener's everyday life for a second. Think about the last time you were terrified you left the stove on before leaving for a trip.
Oh, the worst feeling.
It is. That tiny seed of doubt completely hijacks your nervous system. Your heart rate elevates, you sweat, you can't focus. Now imagine intentionally planting a seed in your own mind that says, if I use the wrong fork in my kitchen, I will die.
Yeah, it's intense.
It is a deliberate biohack. By treating the altar with such lethal respect, you are convincing your own subconscious of the absolute reality of the magic. You aren't just playing make-believe. Your nervous system genuinely believes the danger is imminent.
And that physical, material commitment to the danger extends to the magical artifacts themselves, too. Because if the altar is the engine room of this practice, the statues and talismans are the keys to the ignition. But acquiring and empowering them requires extreme, highly transgressive acts.
Okay, let's look at the paye. These are tiny carved talismans, maybe 3 to 5 centimeters tall. Practitioners wear them around the neck, hidden under clothing, or carry them in a pocket. They are believed to provide a localized field of limitless power, protection, and victory to the owner. But the materials required to carve a true paye are intense.
Very. A baseline talisman might be carved from Palo Santo wood. A darker martial alternative is lead. But not just any lead. It must be lead melted down from bullets that have been surgically removed from the bodies of murder victims.
Harvesting a bullet that ended a human life, that is incredibly grim. But it goes much further into taboo territory, right?
It does. According to the oldest traditions, traced back to the Guaraní roots of the practice, the most powerful paye talismans are sculpted out of human bone.
Human bone.
Yes, and the text specifies the bone must come from the left hand of a corpse. Ideally, this corpse belongs to an executed murderer, or representing the ultimate societal taboo, an unbaptized child.
Oh my God. And the lore insists that the person carving the talisman matters just as much as the material. These bones or bullets should ideally be carved by a prison inmate, specifically a convicted murderer.
Right.
Because Señor la Muerte is widely venerated inside Argentinian prisons as the saint of killers.
But I have to push back on the mechanics here. Does the requirement that a murderer carve the talisman point to a belief that a person's violent actions physically alter the spiritual resonance of the objects they touch? Like, is it a literal interpretation of having blood on your hands where the stain of the soul leaks into the bone as they carve it?
That is precisely the metaphysical logic. In this system, violence, sudden death, and severe transgression are not abstract moral failings or sins to be washed away. They are tangible, harvestable frequencies of energy.
Okay, see. A bullet that shattered a spine holds the kinetic, chaotic vibration of sudden death. The bone of an executed murderer retains the volatile, aggressive energy of the killer. The practitioner is essentially scavenging these highly charged, transgressive batteries to power their own magical intent. The more taboo the material, the higher the voltage.
But having a carved piece of human bone in your pocket isn't enough.
Great.
It is not considered magically active yet. It is just dead matter. It has to be consecrated. It has to be woken up. And the way the followers of the open cult achieve this is one of the most brilliant subversive pieces of folk magic I have ever encountered.
It really is a masterclass in subverting institutional power, because the Catholic Church naturally, staunchly opposes the cult of Señor la Muerte. They view it as pure idolatry and witchcraft.
Right, obviously.
So a practitioner cannot simply walk into their local parish and ask the priest to bless a skeleton carved from a murderer's bone.
No priest is going to agree to that, so they have to bypass the priest's analytical mind. They trick.
Exactly. They camouflage the artifact. A devotee will take a woven basket and fill it with traditional offerings, flowers, or images of recognized Orthodox Catholic saints like the Virgin Mary. And buried deep underneath those flowers is the newly carved statue of Señor la Muerte.
Wait, they literally hide it in flowers?
Yes. They take this basket to a Catholic priest during regular church hours and ask him to bless the basket.
And the ritual requires persistence. They don't just do this once. They take the basket to 7 different churches to be blessed by 7 different priests on 7 consecutive Fridays. Wait, pause for a second.
Yeah.
If this cult was born from rebellion against the church, and they view the church as an oppressive force, why do they desperately want the church's holy water and Latin prayers? Isn't that totally hypocritical?
To a Western Orthodox mindset, yes, it seems contradictory. But in the realm of folk magic, we are looking at a concept called spiritual hacking.
Spiritual hacking.
Yes. The practitioner does not care about the priest's personal intention or the theology of the Vatican. The priest thinks he is blessing a basket of flowers. But the practitioner views the ritual of the blessing, the holy water, the sign of the cross, the vibration of the Latin prayers as a raw, objective, energetic currency.
Like tapping into a power line.
Exactly. The Church has spent centuries accumulating massive reserves of spiritual authority and energy. The practitioner is essentially splicing into that power line, stealing the current, and redirecting it downward to empower a pagan idol right under the institution's nose. It is the ultimate act of magical espionage.
It is brilliant. But the grimoire notes that the closed cult, the esoteric practitioners operating the midnight altars, they find this whole tricking the priest method entirely ridiculous.
They reject it completely because the closed cult views their Lord of Death as a primordial, cosmic god who predates Christianity by millennia. They see absolutely no value in a Christian priest's blessing. To them, the Church's energy is weak and diluted.
So what do they do instead?
Instead, the closed cult uses intense, secret rituals involving herbal baths and blood to wash, consecrate, and bind the spirit to the statue themselves.
And once these artifacts are fully empowered, what do the followers actually do with them? This is where Liber Falxifer shifts from anthropological history into a practical instructional grimoire. It provides highly specific, step-by-step recipes for bending reality.
It does. Let's break down the mechanics of a few of these workings. We can start with the defensive ritual, specifically aimed at protecting a home against intruders and thieves. The text instructs you to take a terracotta bowl.
Right. Why terracotta?
Because it is baked earth, aligning with the chthonic nature of the practice. You fill this bowl with spring water, rum, vodka, and heavily scented sandalwood powder. You place your consecrated statue of the Reaper inside this liquid. You then surround the bowl with 3 white and 3 black candles.
And the practitioner doesn't just light the candles and walk away. The text outlines an intense somatic meditation process. You sit on the floor in front of the bowl, you focus your vision entirely on the candle flames, and engage in deep, rhythmic breathing.
Yes, very focused.
You have to visualize the protective energies of the saint physically emanating from the statue in the water. You hold this focus until you can literally see with your mind's eye the bowl surrounded by a pulsating black-purple aura. You imagine drawing the red-hot flame of the candles into your own lungs with every breath.
It is a highly interactive feedback loop. You are charging the water with your own visualized energy. After 24 hours, you take a red cloth, dip it into this magically charged alcoholic sandalwood water, and you physically scrub every door and window frame in your house.
Wow.
You are painting invisible wards over your entryways. Finally, to seal the working, you take the soaked red cloth to a local cemetery and abandon it on a grave.
There is another defensive ritual designed to deflect the evil eye. For those unfamiliar, the evil eye is the ancient belief that someone's intense envy or hatred can act as a literal psychic attack, causing sickness or bad luck.
Right. Very common in folk magic.
To shield against this, the grimoire instructs you to mix gin, brandy, and powdered myrrh in a glass jar. Myrrh, notably, is a resin historically used in embalming the dead. You pray to the Lord of Death to make his scythe your personal shield. You light a thick cigar and blow the heavy smoke directly into the jar, capping it to trap the smoke and the alcohol together.
But again, the visualization and the physical action are the core of the magic. Every morning for 7 consecutive days, you dip your left index finger, the left side traditionally associated with receiving energy in the occult, into this pungent mixture. You trace a triangle of fire upon your own forehead.
That's intense.
It is. You have to envision it as a strong, red, burning geometric shape that spreads outward, forming a shield throughout your aura, catching any harmful, envious energy directed at you and instantly burning it to ashes.
Tracing a fiery triangle on your forehead with myrrh and gin every morning before work is going to fundamentally alter how you walk through the world.
Oh, undoubtedly.
But that is just the defensive side. Liber Falxifer does not shy away from the offensive. Let's step into the dark side of the book, the curses. I want to look closely at the Coffin of Death spell, which the text describes as one of the most feared and potent rituals of black sorcery within the cult.
It's a very heavy working.
The stated purpose is devastating: to systematically close all paths of opportunity in an enemy's life, leaving only the path that leads to the grave.
The ingredients required for this working are deeply symbolic, each chosen to inflict a specific type of suffering. You require a small, black, wooden coffin. You need graveyard soil, but it must be specifically purchased from the grave of a known murderer.
Jeez.
You need a physical link to the target strands of hair, nail clippings, or a photograph. You need sulfur powder, whole black peppercorns, piece of raw pork, and a vial of pig's blood. And finally, you need 7 rusty iron nails, ideally scavenged from an actual rotting coffin.
Okay, let's break down the mechanics of the assembly. The practitioner places the murderer's soil and the target's photograph inside the miniature coffin. They sprinkle the sulfur and the peppercorns over it. Why peppercorns and sulfur?
Sulfur is historically associated with hellfire, demons, and suffocating fumes. It represents choking and torment. Peppercorns provide sympathetic heat and irritation. They are meant to burn the target's life, causing constant agitation and conflict.
Then comes the raw meat, placed over the photo to symbolize the target's decaying flesh. And then, holding the 7 rusty iron nails in their left hand, the practitioner is instructed to whip themselves into a state of wrathful frenzy.
Right.
They forcefully, violently stab the photograph with the rusted nails, envisioning the target being physically stricken by pain, disease, and darkness.
It is an act of sympathetic magic driven by pure, concentrated malice. They pour the thick pig's blood over the transfixed photograph to seal the curse, fill the remainder of the coffin with the aggressive grave soil, and nail it shut. But the ritual isn't over.
No, it gets darker.
On the following night, after midnight, the practitioner takes this cursed coffin to an actual desolate cemetery. They dig a hole at the head of a grave, bury the coffin in the dirt, and stamp the ground down with their left foot exactly 3 times.
And they walk away without ever looking back over their shoulder. Outsiders looking at this might easily dismiss it as mere superstition, just spooky props. But look at the internal process of the practitioner. Look at the sensory overload.
Yes.
You are smelling the acrid, choking scent of sulfur. You are smelling the heavy myrrh. You are feeling the sticky, metallic texture of pig's blood and the rough, cold friction of rusty iron on your fingers. You are intoxicated by the rum you drank and the thick cigar smoke you inhaled.
This raises an important question regarding the mechanism of these rituals. It is a meticulously designed assault on the senses. The purpose of the sensory overload is to bypass the logical, analytical mind entirely.
Right, you can't be thinking about mundane things.
Exactly. You cannot perform this ritual while calmly thinking about your grocery list. The smells, the textures, and the taboo nature of the acts force the brain to drop into a primal liminal state. The text explicitly demands that the practitioner reach the peak of black meditation to raise their baneful energy.
The magic is heavily physical. It is somatic. You are violently stabbing a photo. You are stamping your left foot in the graveyard at 2 a.m. You are instructed to walk Widdershins counterclockwise around the grave, which in cultism represents unwinding creation, moving against the natural order of time and life.
It demands total bodily commitment.
And here is the psychological hook. By forcing your physical body to act out these intense, terrifying dramas in the dead of night, your conscious mind has no choice but to accept that the magic is real. The somatic action validates the psychological belief. If you just performed a blood ritual in a cemetery, your brain wires itself to believe you have fundamentally altered reality.
Up to this point in our discussion, we have been looking at the folk magic layer of the text, the practical earthly applications, drawing wealth, curing a fever, destroying a rival. But Liber Falxifer does not stop at the graveyard gate.
Not at all.
The second half of the book, which outlines the inner teachings of the Templum Faltis Cruentis, the specific esoteric temple that authored this grimoire, it strips away the Catholic veneer and the simple folk traditions entirely. It aims to reveal the true, ancient, and ultimately biblical identity of the Lord of Death.
This is the cosmic shift. The text explicitly, almost aggressively, dismisses the idea that Señor la Muerte is just a friendly, obedient angel of God. You know, like Azrael, who operates on God's orders and gently cuts the silver cord when it is your time to go. They reject that sanitized version entirely.
They view the obedient angel interpretation as completely useless for high magic. If the entity is just taking orders from a higher creator, it has no independent power to grant your transgressive requests.
That makes sense.
Instead, they look back to terrifying pre-Columbian death gods to understand his true autonomous nature. They connect him to Ayucaba of the Guaraní, who is worshipped as a skeletal figure crouching in a fetal position, waiting to welcome the dead back into the dark womb of the earth.
They link him to Puch, the Mayan god of destruction and disease, who is depicted as a horrifying skeleton adorned with owl feathers and necklaces of human eyeballs.
Yeah, intense imagery.
They point to Mictlantecutli, the Aztec lord of the underworld, a blood-splattered skeleton whose mouth was always open to receive human sacrifices, and Supe, the Incan master of demons.
These were not gentle psychopomps. These were primal, terrifying, sovereign forces of the underworld who demanded blood and respect. But the ultimate revelation of this specific esoteric tradition, what they call the Quainitic tradition, is that the Lord of Death, the left-handed reaper, is none other than Quain, or as he is known in the English Bible, Cain, the first murderer from the book of Genesis.
Hold on. We just spent the last 40 minutes establishing that this cult comes from indigenous South American Guaraní tribes mixed with Afro-Brazilian Kumbanda roots and rebel Catholic aesthetics. How on earth does a Middle Eastern biblical figure like Cain suddenly become the cosmic focal point? Isn't that a massive, almost absurd historical leap?
Geographically and historically, yes, it is a massive leap. But theologically, within the framework of Western esoteric occultism, it makes perfect, terrifying sense. The authors of the grimoire are using syncretism again, but on a cosmic scale. They are taking the localized, visceral power of the South American death cult and mapping it onto the oldest narrative of murder and exile in the Western canon. And to do this, they completely rewrite the book of Genesis.
This is where we dive into deep Gnostic lore. According to the Quainitic tradition, Cain was not the son of Adam.
No. The Orthodox Bible tells us Adam and Eve had Cain and Abel. This tradition fundamentally rejects that. The text teaches that in the Garden of Eden, Eve was seduced by the devil Samael, the serpent of wisdom. It was Samael who sowed his flaming seed within her. This forbidden union birthed Cain. Therefore, Cain is not entirely human. He possesses a divine, a causal, flaming bloodline of spirit and fire inherited from the serpent.
Let's clarify a causal for the listener, because the text uses that word constantly. A causal means existing outside the laws of cause and effect, right?
Correct. In this belief system, the physical universe, time, space, gravity, life, and death is the causal realm. It is a closed system of cause and effect created by a lesser god. A causal refers to the primordial, chaotic, infinite void that existed before creation. By claiming Cain has an acausal bloodline, they are saying he carries a spark of energy that breaks the laws of physics and reality.
Meanwhile, Abel, the second son, was sired by Adam, and Adam was just a creature of mundane clay, created by the demiurge, the creator god of the physical world. So Abel was born spiritless. He was a creature of mud, governed by finite ego and destined to turn back into dust.
And this hidden lineage reframes the entire story of the first murder. In Orthodox tradition, Cain kills Abel out of petty human jealousy because God preferred Abel's sacrifice of lamb over Cain's sacrifice of grain. It is a moral failing.
Right, the sin.
But in the Quainitic tradition, the murder was not a crime of passion. It was a calculated alchemical act. It was the first harvest.
Cain striking down Abel with the scythe or the sickle, the jawbone, whatever the implement, was the act of shedding the clay. He was destroying the illusion of the flesh to release the imprisoned spirit. Cain becomes the first harvester, the first gravedigger.
Exactly.
By spilling human blood on the earth for the first time, he literally waters the soil to open the gates to the other side. He transcends the physical world entirely and becomes the crowned ruler of the dead.
He becomes the master of the very threshold between the causal world of the living and the acausal world of the spirits.
I want to try and ground this Gnostic worldview with an analogy. In Gnosticism, the creator god Jehovah, the demiurge, is not the benevolent father. He is viewed as a tyrannical warden who trapped pure, divine, spiritual sparks inside these decaying meat prisons we call bodies. The physical world is essentially a forced labor camp.
That's a great way to put it.
Think of the physical body as a diver's heavy pressurized lead suit. It is necessary to survive in the crushing pressure of the physical world, but it is ultimately a sensory deprivation prison that prevents you from moving freely or seeing the truth. In this belief system, Cain's act of murder was not a sin. It was the act of taking a knife and cutting Abel's air hose to free him from the heavy suit.
Wow, yeah.
Cain breaks the rules of the simulation through the ultimate transgression. And by doing so, he attains true spiritual liberation outside the control of the creator God.
That is a very accurate representation of their theology. The text explicitly refers to the physical body as an imprisoning garment of ego and flesh. Cain's lineage represents the pneumatic elite, those rare individuals who possess the awakened fire of the spirit, actively rebelling against the stagnant, clay-born, obedient race of Adam. It is a philosophy of total liberation achieved through absolute darkness and transgression.
So, if the practitioner believes that Cain is the true cosmic lord of death, then simply tricking a local Catholic priest into blessing a basket of flowers is not going to cut it anymore. Consecrating an altar to the first murderer requires a ritual that bridges the physical world with his dark, causal kingdom.
And the grimoire provides exactly that in its final chapters. It details the ablution ritual for the consecration of Quain's altar statue. This is the ultimate invocation. It is incredibly complex, dangerous, and synthesizes everything we have discussed about sensory overload and alchemical mechanics.
Let's break down this final ritual. The timing is strict. You perform this over 3 consecutive nights, starting in the dark hours of a Saturday and culminating on a Monday, the traditional day of the Reaper.
The physical setup requires a pristine black cloth, heavily fumigated with myrrh incense to establish the frequency of the grave. On this cloth, you use white chalk to draw a triangle of manifestation with the esoteric jagged sigil of Cain drawn precisely in the center.
Okay.
You place 3 specific candles at the points of the triangle,
Yeah.
one red, one black, and one half red, half black.
The triangle acts as a containment field. But the core of the ritual is the preparation of the baptismal water in a large, dark tureen. And the ingredient list for this water is a staggering catalog of esoteric botany and sympathetic magic.
It's really staggering.
You start with a liter of mineral water and a liter of high-proof rum. You add rose water and a glass of fresh pig's blood. You pour in a bitter rue infusion.
And it intensifies from there. You add powdered myrrh and patchouli leaves. Patchouli is a heavy, earthy scent that historically masks the smell of decay and is deeply associated with graveyard dirt.
Right.
You add cayenne pepper and black pepper. Why the peppers? To inject martial heat, aggression, and speed into the water. You add sulfur powder to bring the suffocating essence of the underworld, and then powdered mandrake root.
Mandrake. That is a cornerstone of old-world medieval witchcraft. Mandrake roots often look like little twisted human bodies, and the folklore says they shriek when pulled from the earth, causing madness. It is a highly toxic psychoactive nightshade.
Yes, its inclusion bridges the South American folk magic with ancient European necromancy. You also add graveyard soil that you have ritually bought from the dead with coins. You crumble the tobacco from 7 strong cigarillos. You tear the petals off 13 red carnations. You drop in 7 black onyx stones. And the most intense ingredient, a teaspoon of human bone powder.
You mix this chaotic slurry together with a wooden spoon, intentionally stirring widdershins counterclockwise against the flow of time. And while you stir, you are chanting specific invocations in a mix of Latin and Spanish, calling upon the first gravedigger, the master of all burial grounds.
Yes.
You are demanding that he open the 7 gates to the kingdom of the shadow of death.
The ritual requires the practitioner to exhaust themselves physically and mentally. And the climax of the ritual demands a personal biological sacrifice.
Right. You cannot just use pig's blood. You heat a sharp knife in the thick smoke of the incense. You use it to slice into your own left hand, drawing your own blood.
Just incredible.
You use a quill pen to draw a binding sigil on a piece of parchment using your blood. And then, looking into a mirror or simply visualizing it, you mark a bloody X directly on your own forehead.
You are marking yourself as kin.
Yep.
You are biologically and energetically aligning your own physical essence with the chaotic mixture in the terrain. You are no longer an observer, you are part of the circuit. And then you take the unconsecrated statue of the Reaper in your hands.
Right. Hold it over the tureen, and you begin to wash it, to baptize it, with this dark, bloody, muddy, peppery water.
And while you are washing it, the mental visualization required is absolute. You have to see, with absolute clarity in your mind's eye, a purple-black aura radiating from the wooden or bone statue, growing stronger with every splash of water. You have to visualize a dark, swirling vortex opening up deep within the terrain, a literal tearing gate to the kingdom of shadows, drawing the causal essence of Cain through the void and locking it into the physical fetish in your hands.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and we step back and analyze this alchemically, what we are witnessing here is a localized, highly personal attempt at forbidden alchemy.
How so?
In traditional Orthodox alchemy, there is a necessary stage called the negredo, the blackening or putrefaction. It is the philosophical idea that matter must be completely broken down, rotted, and destroyed before it can be purified and elevated into gold.
You cannot build the new castle without burning down the old one. Purification through putrefaction. Precisely. But in traditional alchemy, the negredo is just a stepping stone toward the light. The practitioner of Liber Falxifer is intentionally plunging into the negredo and staying there.
Wow.
By mixing human bone, blood, grave dirt, toxic mandrake, and sulfur, they are creating a literal physical soup of death and decay. And by marking their own forehead with blood and invoking the first murderer, they are attempting to align their own spirit with the primordial darkness. They are not trying to fix the physical world, they're trying to bypass the natural laws of the physical universe entirely. They're seeking power and liberation from a source that exists outside of creation.
So what does this all mean? We started our journey today looking at a splintered wooden statue of a skeleton, saved from a burning jungle church by indigenous tribes fleeing the Spanish military in the 1700s. And we have ended up dissecting a complex, blood-soaked midnight ritual aiming for cosmic Gnostic liberation by invoking Cain.
It's an incredible journey.
This text, Liber Falxifer, is a masterclass in how human beings build complex, enduring architectures of meaning. We take the fragmented trauma of colonization, the terrifying reality of our mortality, and we weave them into a system that offers an illusion, or perhaps a reality, to the practitioner of absolute power and control.
Yeah, to briefly summarize the immense scope of the theology and history we have explored today, we journeyed from the violent expulsion of the Jesuits to the Guarani's brilliant syncretic reappropriation of the Palo Santo idol.
Right.
We examined the severe sociological divide of the cult, the bright communal healing feasts of the open cult versus the hidden, taboo-laden, floor-bound altars of the culto probater. We broke down the immense psychological weight of carrying talismans carved from human bone by convicted murderers and the somatic, sensory overload mechanics of rituals involving grave dirt, sulfur, and rusty nails.
So intense.
And finally, we uncovered the esoteric antinomian core of the Templum Falcis Cruentus, the Gnostic revelation of Cain as the left-handed reaper, turning the fundamental story of Genesis into a dark map for spiritual rebellion against the Creator.
And here's why this deeply esoteric material matters to you, listening right now. Even if you never in your life light a black candle, even if you never touch a pinch of graveyard dirt or trace a fiery triangle of myrrh on your brow, this text holds a dark, fascinating, and incredibly accurate mirror up to the human condition.
It really does.
We all live in a world full of massive forces we cannot control. Sudden sickness, systemic poverty, crushing institutional power, the random, indifferent cruelty of chance. And when human beings are pushed to the absolute margins, when they are stripped of all conventional power, the human mind will construct the most terrifying, uncompromising allies imaginable just to reclaim a baseline sense of agency.
Yeah.
We will literally turn death itself into a patron saint. We will call the Reaper our friend if it means we have a shield against the dark.
It is the ultimate human coping mechanism, elevated through trauma and time to the level of high cosmic theology.
It really is. And it leaves me with a final lingering thought for you to mull over today as you go back to your normal, well-lit life.
Okay, lay it on us.
If the ultimate goal of these dark practitioners is to conquer their innate biological fear of death by literally inviting it into their living rooms, by building it a dedicated altar, feeding it raw meat and rum, blowing cigar smoke in its face, and calling it master, what does that say about our own modern, highly sanitized relationship with mortality? Are we actually safer? Are we actually healthier by hiding death away behind the sterile white curtains of hospitals and speaking in hushed tones at polite, quiet funerals? Or is there, somewhere deep in the ancient architecture of the human psyche, a strange, terrible freedom in choosing to walk into the graveyard at midnight and shaking hands with the Reaper?